in Chicago Park trapped in a wooden box is screaming for mercy as she is being buried beneath the ground, ignoring her sorrows and tears. The serial killer goes on to bury her alive, with the news detailing the Chicago Police Investigation Department's arrest of the crime suspect, Francis Allen Visser, who was subsequently released due to the possibility of evidence tampering by the investigator named McCormack, who was fixated with the prime suspect. He's haunted by his mistakes, but the investigator still believes and is convinced that the Bureau is making a grave mistake in freeing the right suspect. The underrated investigator commits suicide, leaving John McCormack's only young son behind. 20 years later, John, the late cop's son, is now a police officer who believes the suspect was released without justice being served. He decides to enter Maureen Town, where Francis Allen Visser is hiding his dark secrets and living under the name Van Wingert. He works as a barber in this town, where he is mentoring an at-risk teenager named Luis on how to become a responsible gentleman in the community as well as maintaining causal friendships with the law enforcement officers. No one would ever suspect that this kind-hearted older man could be a killer. After closing his store in the evening, he walks to dinner to have food and drinks, unaware that John is following him down. At the restaurant, John meets a stunning waitress named Kelly. When he placed his dinner order, it felt strange to Wingert to see this new face. The old man is taken aback by the newspapers when he turns around to see that John has already disappeared. He chooses to leave the restaurant because this is unusual to him. The instant the old man has just stepped outside, John runs into him. He addresses him by his true name and discusses the 1990s women's murder cases. John says that he's also a serial killer who respects and commends Wingert's abilities in the murder as well as for being able to walk freely without being charged by the federal police. However, Wingert maintains his innocence and refuses to talk about such subjects since he thinks the young man has mistaken him for someone else. John swings a knife at him, but fortunately for the barber, the policeman shoots warning shots into the air and eventually apprehends John straight into police custody. When the officer questioned John's motives for assaulting the elderly man, he responded that Mr. Wingert was his father. This outrages the sheriff and prompts him to punch and knock John to the ground. The harmless barber, Van Wingert, pleads with the county sheriff as his friend to drop the charges against the young man because he had no intention of bringing assault charges against the boy. Wingert follows John into the streets with his car after his release from custody. He's intrigued by John's claims, and in addition, since he left Chicago, no one has ever addressed him by his real name. Strange to him but still gives John a lift on purpose to take him home. But John gets astonished when he's driven into the dark, quiet place instead of the motel, which looks like a dumping site. Wingert asks him why he informed the police chief that he's his father and moreover, why he keeps trailing him everywhere he goes. John begins by reminding him of the homicides that occurred in Chicago in the 1990s. The police detained him as a suspect. However, they couldn't find any hardcore evidence to throw him in jail. Even though John claims to be the serial killer's biggest fan, Wingert vigorously disputes and denies any involvement in any murder. John adds that he's eager to learn from him about how to murder women and how to get away with it. Wingert grows irate and urges him to keep away from him since he doesn't intend to take him back. The old man gets into his pickup and advises John to continue on Highway 2, in hopes of seeing a helpful stranger who will provide a ride to him, and leaves John alone, shivering in the woods. Moments later, Kelly, the restaurant waitress, is driving back home from her job through Highway 2 when she spots the man whom she met earlier in the restaurant. She stops and gives John a ride. She reveals to him why she likes this highway. There is no traffic and no patrol officers. She drives him directly to his motel. Kelly works as a waitress, but at the same time as a topless dancer in the club. She intends to make some more bucks from John tonight. John's undercover cop girlfriend, Audrey, is alarmed by John's sudden absence, so she decides to visit his apartment at her own peril. Audrey comes across John's obsessive board pictures, newspaper clippings about the 1990s unsolved homicides of missing girls, and the suspect's new identity, address, and phone numbers. It means he left the city to track down the old man. John wants to prove to Wingert that he's a ruthless killer, so he douses Kelly with drugs in the drinks, which makes her pass out. Then he calls the old man and confesses everything to him. This makes Wingert drive in haste to the motel, only to find out that John has already killed the waitress. John states that he has passed the test he had given him because he knew the exact time when Kelly would use Highway 2 to reach home. John says that the job isn't appeasing enough because he lacks the necessary serial killer's abilities. So he asks him to equip him with more information on abducting and killing the women. Wingert is now less skeptical of John, so he decides to put him under his wing first, and he orders him to dispose of Kelly's deceased body. He has an appointment to meet the following day at a shop. John is unaware that the motel owner is keeping an eye on him through the curtains while loading Kelly into the van. When Audrey phones and meets her captain, she requests his permission to follow up on John's location because it appears that he is following Francis Allen Visser, the prime suspect, who was detained in the 1990s and later freed by the Federal Bureau. The police captain believes John is a lunatic who is simply fascinated by old cases like his late father. Despite her captain's warning that she would no longer be on his payroll if she dared, Audrey proceeds in search of John anyway. John is seen getting ready to meet Wingert at the saloon the following day. When the newcomer enters and claims to be Mr. Wingert's customer and son at the same time, the old man fires his resentful assistant, Luis, right away to make room for John. Wingert takes John through his guidelines and tells him to be attentive to the small details around him. He has to wear nice clothes to be a respectable person and attract women. He gives him more lessons on how to get rid of the puzzle pieces to avoid any trails. The old man takes John to the boutique to get new outfits and gives him his first assignment, to kill the store clerk. He has to trail her everywhere, observe her daily routine, wait for the unguarded moments, and finish the job. Wingert recalls a certain woman he had killed recently. He couldn't stand her beauty, which made him angry and eventually killed her. After her killing, he quoted some verses from the Bible stating that there is no forgiveness without blood. Women take it easy to trust any stranger, but when you check your watch in front of them, you can easily get her attention, luring her to your traps. That night in the bar, John is confronted by Luis, and his buddies accuse him of getting him fired at the barbershop while stealing his police badge. He tries to make a scene in the bar, but John decides to ignore them and move out. He became outraged when he noticed that he had just lost his badge, and in the morning, he followed Luis and his goons to the car wash. He gets outside the car with a baseball bat in order to retrieve his badge. Wingert passes to the antique shop and buys some items, then goes straight to his workplace, unaware that Audrey has traced his address. Luis calls the old man to warn him about John's impersonation. However, before revealing the whole information to him, John started to beat up his gang with a baseball bat. This prompts Luis to switch off the phone, and he breaks into a run. John finds him hiding and beats him up before demanding his police badge back. He threatens to cut off his little Luis if he discloses his little-known secret to Mr. Wingert. Luis begs for forgiveness. He promises to keep the secret. Wingert offers the detective Audrey a ride home after finding her walking along the highway. She initially refuses, but after he pulls his clock trick, she agrees to take a seat in his truck. She tries to strike up some amicable discussions since she is aware of his true identity, but the elderly man cautions her to exercise greater caution because there may be evil people out there who could hurt her. After dropping her off, he goes straight to meet John at the motel, where he notices bruises on his face but denies his involvement in a fight with Luis. Wingert tells him about the phone conversation he had with Luis, who claimed to have news for him before he cut it off. Maybe all he wanted to do was talk about his employment. The elderly man interrupts the talk and offers him a place to stay with him as his son instead of staying in this rundown motel. When the old man discovers John's envelope with his case materials, John starts to get nervous. When they enter the saloon, Wingert shows no observance and conducts himself normally. The old man tells him the tale between him and the enraged detective who went to his house and had him arrested, suspecting him of being the woman's murderer. He became well known because his photos were used in newspapers, but he vigorously contested the charges, and the authorities lacked sufficient proof to put him in jail. In order to start over and escape the outrage of the community, he chose to come to this town. John is hunting for sufficient proof so that he may accuse this elderly man of murder. When the elderly guy left the house that evening to visit the bar, John took advantage of the opportunity to go to his bedroom and search for any clues. John finds pictures of Wingert's family, and the cartoons are replete with literature about serial killers. John comes to the realization that the elderly man might not be a killer and is rather mimicking serial killers' methods. All of the clock tricks and highlighted unguarded moments are basically taken directly from the books. Wingert convinces him that he is not the intended killer. But because of his fascinations, he persisted in pushing his serial killer narratives and obsessions in his direction. It's convincingly just theories, but practically, he's not a monster. The next morning, the old man receives a call from Luis demanding payment instantly. Despite Wingert's request for a few more days, Luis insists on being given his paycheck for the last few customers. The old man decides to visit the shop as a result and makes a pledge to John to return quickly. Wingert hands Luis his paycheck at the barbershop, but after being too nasty to him, he strikes and kicks him, killing him instantly. To conceal his steps, he then sprinkles powder on the floor. When John looks through the old man's family photo albums, he discovers that all of the portraits have price tags on them and were just purchased from the antique store. John discovers that all of these kindly deeds and pieces of advice are fabrications, proving to him that he is the man and has enough evidence that Van Wingert is Francis Allen Visser, the serial killer. He then races his car to encounter him at the store, only to find Luis's lifeless body lying on the floor, and there is nowhere to be seen. It is unknown to him that the ground is powder and keeps his shoe marks on the floor. The scene shifts to Audrey knocking on Wingert's door, pretending to be John's friend, but the old man has already figured out that she is a police detective. Once she entered the house, he punched and knocked her down before she reached for her gun. John drives faster back to the old man's house, only to find no one at home. That instant, John receives a phone call from Wingert, revealing to him that the first day they met, he knew exactly that John was a policeman. Additionally, he has buried his girlfriend alive in a deserted place. If he's lucky, he might find her alive if she doesn't panic. Wingert called the sheriff and reported a robbery taking place at his residence. John punches the officer down before holding him at gunpoint to steal his vehicle. He drives into the woods, where he thinks the old man has just buried his girlfriend. John runs in the wilderness while Wingert approaches the police vehicle to knock the police sheriff out using the rock. Audrey shouts louder for anyone to save her from the locked wooden box beneath the ground. John puts his ears on the ground, hoping she pounds the box. Eventually, he hears the bang, spots the fresh soil on the surface, and uses his bare hands to exhume her from the ground. Not until Wingert appears in his back and uses the shovel to knock him down before telling him that he had already killed the officer, so he shouldn't expect anyone to save him. The old man reveals to him how he brutally killed Kelly, the waitress, because he followed him to the 2nd Street that night because he knew that John lied to him as he killed her. There is nothing that will link him to Kel's deaths because the motel owner witnessed John taking Kel's body from her place. Then, in Luisa's murder, there are John's shoe marks in the saloon that will obviously incriminate him. John pushes and turns the fight around, beating him to an unconscious state. He uses the shovel to dig the ground and eventually exhume his lover. John comes to the realization that Wingert might walk freely once again because there is no hardcore evidence to press murder charges against him once they call police. They decide to bury him alive the way he did to so many innocent souls. The film ends when John and his girlfriend head back to Chicago. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more of my videos. Have a good day.